Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hoping that you're tuning in to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, after listening to the first part of today's broadcast. And today is Thursday, August 12th, and I'm here again with my good friend Ken Caputo, who incidentally was one of the founding panelists when we got this thing kicked off a little over a year ago. And Ken, what does it feel like, for us to be on episode number, I think it's 73 today?
No, it's cool. I mean, it's cool that it's funny how it's like everything, it's just one drop at a time.
Yeah.
It's evolved and accumulated and expanded and, just people have flown in and out and it's been fun conversation, you know?
I can't think of a single one that I didn't love,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there have been some where, we might have skidded close to off the rails, but for some reason or another, we always found ourselves back onto the track. So I'll tell you what, I was posing at the beginning that we kind of delve into absence makes the heart grow fonder. And then the other one is that familiarity breeds contempt. Um, I'm interested in those two together. And the reason for that is many people would think that one's kind of like the front of the hand and the other one's kind of like the back of the hand, right? If
Hmm.
absence makes the heart grow fonder, then, you know, familiarity breeds contempt. So I don't believe necessarily that a man like yourself that pretty much is training himself constantly to live in the moment necessarily, has an awful lot of reporting to do on either one of those conditions unless you do.
Yeah, not really. I think especially the familiarity breeds contempt, I'd say. I'd probably complete that saying with something like in the absence of non-judgment and acceptance, because I mean, to me, the more familiar you become with something, the greater the chance for intimacy and acceptance of what's really in front of you and
Yeah,
all of its flaws. And, so, and I can see where you're saying though, because sometimes familiarity leads to comfort and a lack, the value becomes invisible, so now when it goes away, all of a sudden you learn to appreciate, the elements of it that were there instead of, maybe the flaws overriding the big picture value of it, you
sure.
know? So yeah, so I can say that. And it is funny. I mean, you see that in any relationship, you got those little minor annoyances that somehow all of a sudden seem to be major. And it's generally speaking just a perspective thing, you know. But it happens. It's human.
It absolutely is. And I started with a story on the first half where I was talking about a seminar that I attended, and this had to do with the title of the seminar was Sex and Intimacy. And throughout the 3 hours that we were together, we never talked about sex for some reason. I think that was just a piece of cheese to draw us all in and come to this seminar.
Get everybody to sign up, right?
Exactly. And I learned from that. I'm trying to figure out how I can do sex and networking or sex and business growth, or I don't know how to work that in there yet. I'm still. So the neat thing about the tea table where we were asked to put all the things that we really love about somebody, our partner, our spouse, our significant other, whatever, all those things that we really love about somebody on the left hand of a tea table, and all the things that were annoyances on the right hand table. And so once we got there and we had the brief conversation about what do you miss when they're gone, and everybody was talking about all the good things about them and all the rest of it.
Hmm.
This was kind of like the breakthrough part of the conversation, and what he said was, "This may or may not happen for you, but I can tell you that in my own personal experience, having lost a wife of 23 years, when she was gone, I missed the petty annoyances. I just, like I
Hmm.
had a flavor of her as all of this good stuff. But man, you know, what I wouldn't give to have her stack all the dishes down inside the sink when she knows that I really would like for them to go in the dishwasher when she's done with them, and that the sink should remain open and be a workspace, you know? And what I wouldn't give, you know, to not have to sort through stacks and stacks and stacks of newspapers and magazines and everything that she would just drop right where it was when she was done with it, like these piles all over the house, whatever it
Mm.
was. He said, what I want you to know is those things that you found as annoyances, when you are truly and madly and passionately linked up with somebody at a, you know, a cellular level, you will miss in great loving detail all of those things that used to upset you. And boy, what would I give to have that happen one more time?
Mm.
And I listened to that and I thought to myself, what a powerful conversation. You know, we live
Yeah.
we live in a society where I think when I was coming up, it was probably 1 in 3 marriages would end in a divorce. You know, back in the '60s and early '70s. And then later on, it wound up being, you know, a higher number, 50%. And then it was 3 out of 4. I'm reading statistics a couple of weeks ago that if someone gets divorced, it's likely they'll get married as many as 3 and 4 times in their lifetime. That the connection is always one of kind of a standoffish convenience and never one at the high level of surrender and intimacy that the first one was. So I don't have any experience with that. And I don't think there's a statement that you can make in general because generalities are generally wrong. However, what I can tell you is that over the 45 years that I've been married, when my wife goes away for 10 days to 2 weeks doing something, you know, with our grandchildren in another state and I don't see her, and it's like right now I'm on what the Aussies call a walkabout. I'm probably going to be gone from home 2.5 to 3 weeks, a combination of business and pleasure. But the point is that, yeah, I can definitely see um, the waking up, the stuff in the early morning, without getting into too much personal detail, the whole idea that when somebody is missing, and I can relate to good friends, other relatives, and you know, by golly, I just love to hear and so say something using the absolute wrong words one more time with such conviction, you know?
Mm. Yeah, it's isn't it interesting how I mean, when you were sharing the story about the two columns and the positive side, negative, whatever it is, and just, what just kept running through my head was that's just the person, and those are expressions of that person. So where's the center of gravity for the love? Is it in the expression or is it in the person? You know, and it's interesting. I wonder if, for a lot of people, when something, after 23 years of marriage and then they're gone, it's all the things. It's the person that you love. And now you're just thinking about the various ways that those expressed itself. And, I don't know, there's something powerful in finding fondness and love and affection when it's not easy, and the things that annoy them or the things that you disagree with. And, or, when situations are difficult, whatever it is, raising kids, finances, work, all that stuff, So, yeah, so you reflect back, and I think it's almost like this recognition that it was just them and it all had value because it was all part of them, you know?
Yeah.
So the other thing that struck me is just, and whether it's marriages or not, um, isn't it kind of interesting how relationships again are impermanent? They're all broken cups. None of them last forever. So something's going to change. Either it's as definitive as death, or it's the fact that we're all evolving and growing and changing as humans. And sometimes, I mean, my personal experience anyway is, there's a lot of relationships that were very powerful in the moment, and somehow I changed, they changed, and the connection changed. And it might have been that we don't have much of a relationship anymore, or the how that relationship manifests has changed. It's all part of it, but it's interesting. It feels like you get stuck when you try to hold on to something that's not what it was, and your attachment is to it, like the nostalgia thing. If it was the way it used to be, we'd all be okay. Why can't we go back to that? It's like you're probably misremembering anyway. I know I do, but but yeah, I think in the end, it's just, if your center of gravity is loving you know, what it is holistically, then you find the fondness, when the absence occurs, because it was just part of them.
It's very interesting. And the table, in my opinion, turned out to be a red herring. Guess what? Guess what you wrote down was what you thought of in the first couple of minutes, and then we're done, right? Is that all about the person that you've been with for 7, 10, 20, 30 years?
Oh,
No,
of course not. Yeah, yeah.
even scratching the surface. Most of us cannot language what we think are the best things about our mate. We just can't. We don't have that
Mm,
language. There's a feeling inside that we get, and there's the equally there's the the propathy and the antipathy, right? So
right.
also, I guess it's pronounced antipathy sometimes. Depends on if you're a Brit or not, right? Antipathy. So so the thing is here you are in a moment trying to describe the indescribable. It's an
Yeah.
impossible task, doing a tea table about a human being and describing their soul and their chi and all of the thing that is about them that makes you feel certain ways, both good feelings and bad feelings. And at the end of the day, what you want to know is it's a complete life to experience all of that and be fully present to every single feeling and to suck all of the juice out of, man, I'm not up to this feeling, to get all the way out on the skinny branches of, this is the most euphoric that I've ever felt as a human being, and I am so glad to be alive right now, to the
Mhm.
other end of the skinny branches, which is, I know I have to stay standing here and get this done, but for God's sake, would you, somebody please, take this cup away from me? I don't want it anymore, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you don't want to make really long-term lasting decisions when you're at either one of those two ends.
Mm,
That's just not good for anybody long term. But the whole idea is that the longer you can stand there in the presence of it, uh, I'm going to bring up Harry Houdini. What do we know about Harry Houdini? This was a man who prided himself on being able to take a shot in the stomach from
mhm.
anyone in the world. He would put out a challenge, and this is something that everyone can look up. So don't bother fact checking me, because I'm going to make up a story and you're going to go along with it. Illustrate. But how did he start to learn how to take a shot? Over years worth of time, one day at a time. He did stomach exercises, he did sit-ups, he did leg crunches where he held his feet up in the air, putting all of the tension on his abdominal muscles, holding them up there for first 30 seconds at a time, then a minute at a time. I heard a story at one point. It's not generally published, but I heard that had there been a Guinness World Record for the amount of time that somebody could hold their ankles up in the air without touching the ground, he probably would have held that title.
Mm,
So here's the thing: um, through his lifetime, this was his pride and joy, that anybody in the world could take a shot at his belly. And we know he didn't drown. They didn't put him in a box and wrap chains around it, and he died at the bottom of the East River in New York City or anything. How'd he die? Someone punched him in the gut.
punch in the stomach. Yep.
He wasn't ready for it. He didn't get a chance to tense his muscles up. And he ended up with a rupture, and the rest is history. He was gone.
Mhm.
So when you think about what we do, and each time we stop doing something because it's uncomfortable, it's not comfortable being that much, you know, connected with another human being to where you're seriously wondering if you could ever get over it if you were separated. That having that euphoria out here, like this moment, we're always getting those nagging thoughts in the back of our mind. The that's where the familiarity breeds contempt. That could be just this little nagging voice. Don't go all the way there. Don't go all the way there. Never
Mhm.
surrender, because you're going to get hurt. I promise you, you're going to get hurt. And on the other side, it's going, come on, try it, you'll like it.
Yep.
And so here you are, um, the familiarity breeding contempt is that thing where while somebody is present, all you at some point can see is the right hand of the tea table. And now you're adding things to the bottom of the list,
Right, right.
as if you could trade that all away and get them to be just the other things, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So the thought that I have, with this whole conversation is, and I think you mentioned it in a pretty good way earlier, the the opportunity is to stand there and be present to either and all of those and anything else that comes, and just appreciate this is one more way for you to experience not that person, but your reaction to that person's stimulation. And in most cases, it's a response to your initial stimulation to them. And
Mhm.
so now you've got this cycle of learning to dance with a situation as opposed to making a Richard Simmons deal a meal. I'm going to take these cards and put them over there, and we're going to take these cards and put them over there. No, you just take every moment as it comes and be thankful and appreciative and graciously respectful, simply because you may never get a chance to experience this thing again. So why not get it all right now? Get all the juice out of it you possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feeling empowered?
Always. Except when I'm not.
Exactly. And what happens when you're not?
It depends. Sometimes it's a nice little break, little vacation. Nothing wrong with throwing a little, you know, a sleep pity party for yourself, or uh, it's interesting. It's just all part of, it's that whole thing. We're all human, and sometimes we suck at it.
Yeah, but see, here's the neat thing. When you are able to decide that, yes, I'm taking a minute of time out here. I want to experience the abject rejection and the failure that's available to me in this moment that I almost never
Yeah.
get to feel, because
I want to be angry for no real reason,
yeah,
no rational
what's
reason.
that feel like? This is like brave new territory, to break into and all that. And, how do you get language to describe to somebody else who's going through something? We get into those conversations where somebody else is either, in the domain of, absence and or the domain of, being too familiar. And those things are making it hard for them to get on with their day. The best way to relate to somebody is to have had those experiences yourself, or roll your sleeves and jump into the muck and mire with them, and hold their hand and be right there with them and go through it with them. I mean, that's friendship in my book.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the challenges right now for a lot of people, there's a lot of energy, and it's how do you do that while also maintaining a healthy boundary, you know, for yourself, so that you're not ending up overextending yourself in service to something that may shift towards, like, not being appropriate, or being, toxic or detrimental, you know. that's that's a conversation for a whole nother day, but it's, it is one of those things, especially for people who are very caregiver oriented by nature. You can end up overextending yourself, and now you're not helpful to anyone. It's like that. There's another good expression for you: put your own oxygen mask on first. you know. So,
And
yeah. So how do you
then,
recognize that? You know.
yeah, I like the Southwest where they used to say, okay, should there be an event and the oxygen masks put your own mask on first and then your husband.
Yeah.
So I want you, if you will, to distinguish that because it's powerful. The whole idea of boundaries and overextending yourself. And would you say that it's a thought process in terms of weighing what's going on and the potential consequences coming from a historical event where it didn't work out before and you did the same thing? Or a decision that comes out of a decision that you made earlier that I'm going to go this far in the future, and when I see myself at this point, that's when I'm going to say probably need to stop here, step back again, and see if there's another way for us to go about this because this doesn't generally work out well for me. How would you language it, Ken?
um, I think that well, first of all, I think that everyone needs an objective coach, because when you're, especially if it's someone that is like familial, or someone that's really close in your circle. It could be a spouse, could be a child, whatever. It's really, really hard to have some clarity as to where you are, and I can remember learning as a lifeguard very early on that when someone's drowning, they can't process the fact that they will take you down with them. The fact that you want to save their life has no relevance on the sheer crisis that they're in.
Sure.
So you learn early on. I remember one of the early on instructors. You learn all these releases and escapes and ways to, help them if they're starting to pull you under. And at some point, you may have to literally sit there and let them drown, then get them out of the water and hope you can resuscitate them, because it's the only way left to help them. And if they're that strong, you're not doing anyone any help by both of you drowning.
Yep.
But I always ask myself that question. I've reflected on it over the years. Like, how could I just tread water and watch someone drown, watch them go under? Like, and if that was a loved one, how do I do that? Even if it's the right decision, you have so much of your own stuff that's going to be tied up in that, so, so you, but if there was someone else there reminding me objectively this is the best way, and yeah, they may not survive it, or or whatever, it probably would help lend perspective.
Sure.
So like if you're, I mean, how many people stay in very, very, you know difficult situations, whether it be a relationship or a work environment or whatever, because they're just so pulled into it that they need help getting a perspective that will allow them to figure out where those boundaries are. And then you need the strength to actually act on that. That's really, really hard to do. So I don't know if I'm really answering it, because I don't know. I know personally what I learned over the years was to kind of, you know, be very clear on what's important to me and what I'll accept. And I was one of the ones that would kind of overextend myself, and take on, maybe harm onto myself to try to help someone else. And, and that didn't work out very well. So I had to, relearn that and kind of firm up some of those, basically boundaries, I guess is the simplest way to put it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's different for everyone though. It's a tricky thing.
It's a very interesting and slippery kind of a place to be because
Yeah. Yep.
um, I too I learned life saving when I was 12 years old, and then WSI water safety instruction when I was 14.
Mhm.
And the woman that taught us had I don't know what she had, six children, and she always taught us to keep our eyes on the goal. The goal in life saving is to save everyone's life. So she taught us a technique when we get to a certain place, because the person who's drowning wants to climb on top of you to get up
Hmm.
their face up above the air, into the air,
Yep.
not realizing they're dragging both of us down. So her technique was, you don't get close enough to somebody whose arms are flailing. You dive and you come up behind them. And in
Hmm.
some cases, you may have to smack them in the face, just to shock them out of their current, you know, and then you say, I'm here to help you. And you
Yep.
put your arm up underneath their arm, across their shoulder, and on your chest as you're, swimming
Yeah.
away
And then you,
with your
yep.
other arm. Now, that's really a technique that you can use in some situations, but if you happen to be, a 5'1", 96-pound little girl who may be a terrific, lifeguard, saving a 260-pound man who's 6'7", um, it's going to take more than that, so you
Yeah.
better bring a float, so you always have to be prepared for the downside. And your arm
Hmm.
is always locked through the rope on the float, so that no matter what happens, you're always going to get, drawn back up to the surface again. So the whole idea is, the more that you're concerned about the potential of something turning bad, you can
Hmm.
extend your boundaries from time after time after time. And the more that you've been in a situation where you have to actually go out and save somebody's life, you almost always bring the buoy. There's never a time that you don't bring, something that's going to give you buoyancy and draw you back to the surface. If
Hmm.
someone's going to go, it should never, ever, ever be the lifeguard.
Yeah. You would hope.
Yeah.
And
And
you're right. The more, the more experience you have, the more skillful you become, and the more training you've had,
exactly.
the more likely you are to be able to navigate that situation successfully, you
But
know?
see, here's the power in what you've brought up, and for you to presence this and to talk about boundaries, is that you have to decide that this is where you want to play. You don't
Hmm.
show up to be a lifeguard every day hoping that nobody needs you to go out and save their life. That's just
Right.
not. And so in a
Yeah.
relationship, I think this is powerful. You have to make the distinction, for yourself, that it has nothing to do with the other person. And
Hmm.
it's not true, right? It's not true that it has nothing to do with the other person. But in order to be in a situation where you're empowered to complete your mission and your task and your goal, you have to act as if. And
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
I have been amazed to see little 5'1", 100-pound little girls do some amazing freaking things with people who were almost dead set against being saved, you know?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was the one where I actually saw the right hand come across and probably broke the guy's nose. She said, I'm getting you out of this water. Okay. So you can keep flailing, or you can just go limp and float, and I'll drag
Mm.
you back to shore. Got his attention, and she had to hit him that hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody got trained the same way, but I don't think it's in the Red Cross manual that you smack them in their face to get
Yeah.
their.
That one I never heard before.
Yeah.
But I get it. I get it.
You got to do
Yeah.
what you got to do in order to be successful in the mission, and
Mm.
never, ever, ever do just enough not to be successful. I took that away as a
Yeah.
life lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing, the other, I think, variable is, what is your, you see this, I think a lot right now about Dunning-Kruger. There's your perceived level of confidence versus your actual level of competence.
Yeah.
So what if that 5'1" girl has all the belief in the world that she can save and knows all the things, and then they both end up under the water,
Yes.
and now it's too late. So it's like, what a challenging thing to accurately assess your competence in navigating the situation that's in front of you,
Yes.
you know so
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's.
it's absolutely amazing what you're saying, because all of that comes with being so skilled and trained that this is all part of your unconscious competence. Those
Mhm.
are the best people. And I don't know, did you actually work summers as a lifeguard and that sort of thing? Or,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
okay. At a pool or in the ocean?
Mostly at a pool, actually. As a head guard for a pool for quite a few years. So, yeah.
In your case, a lot of times you didn't even need to get in the pool. You had a 15-foot pole that you could stick out for somebody and say, hey, grab onto the end of this. And
Yeah, no, and you didn't have to worry about currents and all that. Very different,
I was in open
Yeah,
water, WSI.
yeah, no, it's a very different thing, especially if it's ocean. So, and even some lakes though, there's some pretty tricky currents that can.
We were trained at Highland Lake in Ledyard, but her goal, she used to have the greatest smile as she's standing up there on the float. You know, we would swim out to the float, and then we would have to swim 30 laps back and forth, which was 5 miles. And then when we were done with that, then she'd give us a sandbag and she'd say, this 20 pounds sandbag, you got to keep this thing, it's just dead weight, and you got to keep it, as close to the surface of the water as you possibly can for 5 more laps. And, we had 8 people that were in my class, and one by one, we would all do that. And, everybody's cheering everybody else. I was the next to the youngest in that group. And there were people that were 15, 16 years old, very accomplished swimmers, had been lifeguards themselves and came back, so that they could instruct and go to the next level. And those are the kinds of things, even though, that was 55 years ago. I still remember, and I don't remember her first name, but her last name was Wagner, and she had a really terrific family. All the kids were varsity athletes, and some all stayed in wrestling and football. And she just instilled in them a particular kind of drive that I don't think is very ordinary in anyone that I've ever known. And we got to hang with her a little bit.
Yeah, that's
So,
cool.
yeah. So, a nice trip down memory lane. I'm all about that this week. Back in Florida, renewing my roots here. And Ken, any other thoughts before we sign off? What kind of an empowering wish do you have to bring to people for the time between now and the next?
I think a lot of what we've talked about is just a willingness to look a little deeper, and and it's you just look at so much tension right now that I think is because everything's surface, and you know instead of doing a little bit of the hard work, which is asking bigger and better questions, and being okay with things sometimes having complicated answers that you neither like nor agree with.
Sure.
And sometimes that's just the way it works out, you know?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And all of this, whether you're, fond in an absent situation or have a little bit of contempt in a familiar situation, remember, this has to do with seemings. When things look familiar to you, it may not be as it is occurring for you, because you have all these different ways that you can see things. And in many cases,
Yeah.
it comes back to just making a new decision. As Ken said, be curious about this. What happens if I go one iota further? What happens if I go one iota further? And I think the really, really neat part of all of this conversation for me is, as you go through life, you're doing one of three different things. You're growing, you're sliding backwards, or you're staying the same. It all depends on what you want. And once you've made your mind up and you decide what you want and where you're going and the type of life that you'd like to have, what do you think is going to show up for you? So I remember, this is the power, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If you've got an idea, go do it. Give it a shot and see what you're made of. So, anything else, Ken?
Nope. Good place to stop right there.
Absolutely. So it's been a really marvelous time with you again. And our folks at home, thank you. We are available on the X Audio Network, which is out on all of the top 16 or 17 podcast platforms, including Audible, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, et cetera, Spotify, et cetera. So come back and see us soon. And in the meantime, you've got the power. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.